Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Israel could attack Iran at any moment now. Global tensions are mounting, oil prices have shot up and the stock markets are down. In India, both the Sensex and the Nifty closed the day's trade in red. The American markets are also down. The Israeli war cabinet has met and preparations are believed to be in progress. Israel says it is gearing up for a quote-unquote significant strike. In the meantime, the ground offensive in Lebanon is intensifying. Take a look at this first. Those pictures are from Beirut. Israel has intensified its airstrikes in Lebanon. Last night it struck central Beirut. The target was a multi-story block in Bashura, barely a few meters away from Lebanon's parliament, the Prime Minister's office and the United Nations headquarters in the country. That's where Israel struck, close to this area. This kind of attack is unprecedented. Israel is conducting airstrikes deep inside the Lebanese capital. Through the day today, Israel has been pounding central Beirut. There are reports of several large blasts. At least 9 people have died in these strikes.
On the borders, members of Hezbollah killed Israeli soldiers. But Israel comes and kills people here. Whenever there is a building, they damage it. This is what they are able to do.
Earlier, Israel had said that its operations are, and I'm quoting, limited, localized and targeted. But with today's strikes, Israel has expanded the scope of the battlefield. Prime Minister Netanyahu says Israel is in the middle of a difficult war.
We are
at the height of a difficult war against Iran's axis of evil, which wants to destroy us. This will not happen because we will stand together, and with God's help, we will win together. We will get the hostages back from the south, and we will get our citizens back to the north, and we will guarantee the victory of Israel.
Fighting is also intensifying in southern Lebanon. Israeli troops are engaging Hezbollah fighters there. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, has suffered casualties. We told you about this yesterday. 8 Israeli soldiers have died in the Lebanon operation so far. Hezbollah says it repelled Israeli forces. It also destroyed 3 Israeli tanks. Meanwhile, more missiles continue to fly towards Israel. Both the Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen are firing them. Israel remains undeterred by these attacks. In fact, the IDF is doubling down. It is deploying more troops for this offensive. It is also asking more locals in Lebanon to leave. Israel has issued more evacuation notices today. So far, 76 villages have received such orders. All of them are in southern Lebanon. Israel has released a video showing its troops in action. So Israel has no plans to back down in Lebanon. It is also assessing the damage from the Iranian attack 2 days ago. Fresh satellite images have emerged. Take a look at what they show. This is an Israeli air base. It houses their most advanced aircraft. An Israeli air base with the aircraft like the American-made F-35s. Iran targeted this air base in Tuesday's strike, and it did inflict some damage. Now look carefully. A roof near the main runway is damaged. There are large pieces of debris around the building. This confirms what many experts have been saying, that Iran did manage to breach Israeli air defenses.
Iran launched approximately 200 missiles at the state of Israel yesterday. Iran attacked civilian areas and endangered the lives of many citizens. Thanks to proper civilian behavior and high-quality defenses, the damage was relatively minor. We will respond. We know how to locate important targets. We know how to strike with precision and power.
That's why Israel wants to hit back hard. Yesterday, they attacked Syria again with an airstrike in Damascus. And what was the target? Reports say the Israelis killed Hassan Jafar al-Qasir. Hassan Jafar al-Qasir, the son-in-law of Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah chief who was killed by Israel last week. Now they've killed his son-in-law. There is no official confirmation on this yet, neither from Lebanon nor the Hezbollah, but it's being widely reported. And if this story checks out, it would mean that Israel has dealt another blow to the Hezbollah. Meanwhile, Iran is making some diplomatic moves. The Iranian president was in Qatar today. That's Masoud Pezeshkian. He's trying to rally diplomatic support after Tuesday's attack. From Doha, he issued a fresh warning to Israel.
We are not in pursuit of war with Israel. They promised us peace. But Israel has terrorized our guests in Tehran during our presidential inauguration. We want to establish peace. If you disagree, peace will not be established.
So Iran is putting up a brave face. But behind the scenes, the regime is also cracking down. Reports say several arrests have been made. The Iranian leadership fears that Israel has infiltrated their security establishment, including the powerful Revolutionary Guards. So a purge is now underway to clean up the upper ranks. Iran's supreme leader himself gave the orders. That's Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Apparently, he had also warned Hassan Nasrallah just days before Nasrallah's assassination. Both leaders, Khamenei and Nasrallah, had spoken to each other, and Khamenei, in no uncertain terms, had asked Hassan Nasrallah to leave Lebanon. He told him that there are Israeli spies within the Hezbollah and that Israel was planning to kill him. But it appears that the warning came too late. The Hezbollah chief could not act on Khamenei's advice, and Israel managed to kill him. Reports say Khamenei is deeply worried now about the state of Iranian security establishment and the extent to which it has been compromised. Khamenei himself has been moved to a secret location. He's possibly planning Tehran's next moves there. If Israel attacks Iran, Tehran will need more retaliatory options, and West Asia will remain trapped in a cycle of violence.
So I caution the government of Israel not to be blinded by rage. It would be a mistake for Israel to occupy Gaza again.
We do not want to see a major operation happening in Rafah.
That's been the story so far. Biden draws a red line, Israel crosses it with no consequences. First, it was civilian casualties. Then it was the occupation of Gaza. Then attacking Rafah. Frankly, we have lost count of the red lines. There's a new one every 2 months. This time it's about Iran. Israel is planning to escalate after Tuesday's missile attack. Reports say they could hit Iran's nuclear sites, but Joe Biden is against it. He says the response should be proportional.
Would you support an attack on Iran's nuclear sites by Israel?
The answer is no. I think there's things. We'll be discussing with the Israelis what they're going to do, but all 7 of us agree that they have a right to respond, but they should respond in force.
Let me explain the thinking here. For Netanyahu, this is a career-defining chance to dismantle Iran's nuclear program. All his mistakes in the last 1 year would be forgiven. His legacy would be set for life. Just one problem though, he can't do it alone. If Iran hits back, he needs an insurance plan. He needs someone to shield his country, and that is the United States of America. If Biden privately or publicly backs such an attack, Israel will go ahead. There are no second thoughts. But if he doesn't, Israel may have to rethink. At least that is Biden's assumption. The question is, will it work? We ask because it hasn't in the past. It hasn't worked in the past. In October last year, Biden asked Israel to protect Gazan civilians. More than 40,000 are dead now. He then told Israel to not occupy Gaza. Last we checked, Israel's military controls the entire Gaza Strip. Biden then asked Netanyahu to not invade Rafah. Today, Rafah is a ghost town. Only concrete and metal debris remains. And finally, he asked Netanyahu to not attack Lebanon, to take a ceasefire deal. And again, Israel ignored him. Right now, Israeli soldiers are battling the Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, meaning they have invaded. So looking at the past, one thing is quite clear. Israel is more than willing to ignore Joe Biden's warnings. But why is that? Most of Israel's weapons, after all, come from the US. Washington is their most important ally. So how can Netanyahu just keep ignoring him? Well, he can because of Biden's weakness. You see, a red line requires two conditions. A, there should be only one. Multiple red lines defeat the whole purpose of a red line. And B, you must enforce it. Biden did not meet either condition. He revealed his hand in March this year. The president was asked about Israel invading Rafah. Listen to his response.
It is a red line, but I'm never going to leave Israel. The defense of Israel is still critical, so there's no red line. I'm going to cut off all weapons so they don't have the Iron Dome to protect them.
So he made it pretty clear America will never abandon Israel. Secondly, he couldn't enforce his red lines. There are many ways to do it. You can stop military sales, you can stop shielding Israel at the United Nations Security Council, but Joe Biden did not do any of that. He stopped one military shipment in the month of May this year. That's it, one shipment. 50,000 tons of aid given, just one shipment withheld. Honestly, it is humiliating for Biden. He's supposed to be the most powerful person in the world, yet Netanyahu took him for a ride. Could this time be any different? Well, on paper, there is more at stake. Iran is more powerful than Hezbollah or Hamas. They could even strike American assets. More than 43,000 US soldiers are deployed in West Asia. If the conflict widens, they could be targeted. Biden will want to avoid that in the middle of an escalation. The last thing he needs is an attack on US soldiers. At the same time, he cannot look weak, especially with Donald Trump in the picture.
The world right now is spiraling out of control. I've been talking about World War III for a long time, and I don't want to make predictions because the predictions always come true. We have a non-existent president and a non-existent vice president who should be in charge, but nobody knows what's going on.
That's the challenge for Joe Biden. This is probably the most important red line he's drawn. But is he willing to enforce it? Netanyahu is reportedly planning to escalate within days. So we'll have the answer soon. Now let's talk about Israel's opponents. Israel is not fighting a single enemy. It's not even a two-front war. Israel is dealing with multiple opponents in multiple countries, all linked together by one player, Iran. Israel has the latest weapons, unmatched intelligence, and American support. Iran, on the other hand, has its proxies, the so-called axis of resistance, or as Israel likes to call it, the axis of evil.
I would like to send the condolences from the bottom of my heart to the families of our heroes who fell today in Lebanon. May their memory be blessed and they rest in peace. We are at the height of a difficult war against Iran's axis of evil, which wants to destroy us.
Yesterday, Netanyahu sent his condolences to the families of 8 Israeli soldiers who died in Lebanon. They were killed during the ground operation in Lebanon's south, in an on-ground battle against Hezbollah. On the other side, you had Hezbollah doing some chest thumping.
Today, our forces fought in the first heroic battle this morning in Al Adessa and also in Maroun al-Ras. minutes before the start of this presser. What happened today is only the beginning of what awaits the occupation forces. The leadership of Hezbollah will follow the promise of the Hassan Nasrallah himself and will rebuild in a way that will be better and more beautiful than they were before.
Hassan Nasrallah is dead. But that does not mean that the Hezbollah is down and out. They still have thousands of fighters, tens of thousands of rockets, which they continue to fire into Israel. Yes, Israel has the upper hand, but invading Lebanon won't be easy, no matter the technological advantage. Ask the Americans how their occupation of Afghanistan went against the apparently backward and impoverished Taliban. It shows you how hard it is to occupy foreign territory with a hostile population. And while Israel marches north, it also has to watch the south for Iranian proxy number 2, the Houthi rebel group.
The Air Force of the Yemeni Armed Forces carried out a military operation targeting a vital target in the Jaffa area in occupied Palestine using a number of Jaffa-type drones. The operation successfully achieved its objectives, by the grace of God, with the drones reaching their targets without the enemy being able to intercept or shoot them down.
The Houthis were once considered bit-part players in the region. Their influence was limited to Yemen, where Iran had been fighting a proxy war with the Saudis. But then the October 7th attack took place, and the Houthis started attacking ships in the Red Sea. That is how they shot to international fame. And even now, they're sticking to this tried and tested strategy. They have warned of what they call a new phase of their campaign. They're actually sending emails to shipping companies, warning them to steer clear. The reason is obvious. They want to disrupt trade. It's not about sinking ships. The Houthis just want to cause problems for Israel any way they can. The Houthis are also firing missiles and drones at Israel. But this isn't as effective as the Red Sea attack. So barring the odd drone here or there, they leave the conventional fighting to the other proxies.
The Yemeni armed forces salute the heroic Mujahideen on the fronts of Gaza and the West Bank, as well as the fronts of Lebanon and Iraq, and affirm their continuation in carrying out military operations against the Israeli enemy until the aggression is stopped and the siege on the Gaza Strip is lifted, as well as stopping the aggression on Lebanon.
Let's look at all these different fronts that he mentioned. You have 2 proxies in Gaza. It's not just Hamas. You also have the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or PIJ. Now, these 2 groups operate independently, but sometimes they do come together, like we saw during the October 7th attack last year. That's one. Then there's the Hezbollah in Lebanon, the most powerful of Iran's proxies. Next door in Syria, you have the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, or PFLP. It was officially a political party like Hamas and Hezbollah, but it also has its own armed wing, the Abu Ali Mustafa Brigades. They are among a number of Iran-backed militias in Syria, which is why you see Israel bombing Damascus every so often. Then there is Iraq, where you have the Popular Mobilization Forces. This is a coalition of armed groups with various mandates and operations, but among them you have anti-Israel factions like the Kataib Hezbollah, which is another Iranian proxy. And rounding off the list are the Houthis in Yemen. So that's what Israel is dealing with. Iran-backed groups in Lebanon, Gaza, Yemen, Syria, and Iraq. They make up the axis of resistance or evil, depends on who you support. We've talked about the West, we've talked about Iran's proxies. These are groups that have picked a side. Their allegiance is pretty clear. But we can't say the same about the Gulf Arab states. If the war between Iran and Israel escalates, what will the Arab states do? Which side will they support? In April, their choice was pretty clear. Back then, when Iran struck Israel in the month of April, the Arab states shot down Iranian drones. They basically defended Israel. What about this time? No such indication so far. What's more, there are some interesting developments in the region. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian is visiting Qatar. Guess who else is in the country? The Gulf foreign ministers, 6 of them form a bloc called the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council. You've got Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman and Qatar, 6. Their foreign ministers met in Doha. Together, they condemned Israel's aggression in Lebanon and Gaza. They also asked all stakeholders to de-escalate, to prioritize dialogue. After this meeting, the Saudi foreign minister met Iran's president. The Saudi foreign minister and the president of Iran, they exchanged a handshake. They even held delegation-level talks. Pezeshkian called Saudi Arabia a brother nation. Now, his intentions are quite clear. Israel could strike any moment. Yet he flew all the way to Doha and held these meetings. He's trying to rally the Muslim world. He wants to see if he can count on the Arab states. Well, can he? Let's look at the dynamic. Iran and the Arab world have traditionally been rivals. Iran is a Shia Muslim country. The Gulf Arab states are Sunni Muslims. So the rivalry was religious and political. But right now, relations are at a good place. China brokered a normalization deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and since then, ties have improved. Last year, Iran's president visited Saudi Arabia for talks. Even the new president, Pezeshkian, was congratulated by Riyadh. So the Arab states have no reason to rock this boat, to disrupt this reset. They mainly have 2 priorities. One is Palestine, the other is business. That's all that they care about. Most Arab people support Palestinian statehood. The war in Gaza has been traumatic for them. So the Gulf rulers cannot abandon the cause so easily. At least in public, they must put up a facade. Secondly, a lot of money is at stake. Iran sits on a very important trade route, the Strait of Hormuz. Nearly 30% of the world's oil passes through this route. In the past, Iran has threatened to shut it off, and if war breaks out, they may actually do it. Iran could disrupt the global oil supply. They could also strike Arab oil refineries. In fact, Iran has reportedly warned about this. They told the United States that if Iranian refineries are attacked, Arab ones would also burn. That's the biggest worry for the Gulf states. Disruptions to oil and trade. Would they like to see Iran weakened? Well, maybe. Would they like Iran's nuclear program destroyed? Definitely. But the fallout is too unpredictable, which is why Gulf states want a de-escalation. And what are they doing to achieve it? Not very much. The Gulf Arab states are close allies of the US, yet they haven't pushed Joe Biden on this issue. Look at their statement in Doha. This is what they've said. We urge the international community to fulfill its responsibilities to maintain security and stability in the region and to implement international legitimacy resolutions related to the area. They're asking the global community to step in. Well, they already have. Most countries have demanded a ceasefire, but Israel won't listen to them. The only country that has a chance is the United States of America if the Gulf states push Joe Biden. Maybe he will take a tougher stance. But for whatever reason, they haven't. The Gulf seems to be taking a wait and watch approach. Usually, it's a safe strategy, but in this case, it could easily backfire. So most Arab states seem to be neutral. Why do you suppose that is? Well, no one likes war, especially if you're focused on the economy, but there may be another reason. You see, all the Arab nations in the Gulf have something in common. They've all partnered up with the US for security. And all the petrodollars, no doubt. These partnerships have allowed the US to build bases all over the place and station thousands of troops in the region. As we speak, the Americans have more than 43,000 boots on the ground. And more soldiers are on the way. Where are they headed? Well, here's a map of the region. And these are the American military sites in the area. There are a lot, both permanent bases and makeshift sites. The smaller sites are all over the place, even in Arab nations which are sympathetic to Iran. Countries like Iraq and Syria. The Americans have bases there too. Then there are bases in Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt and Oman. As you can see, the US has troops practically everywhere. Troops, jets, drones, ships, you name it. It seems every Arab country has made some deal or the other with the Americans. The largest concentration of bases is in Kuwait. There are 5 bases there, and about 13,500 permanently deployed troops, mostly at Camp Arif Jan and the Ali Al Salem Air Base. Those were the numbers from 2021 before the latest conflict, so expect additional deployments right now. Now, Kuwait is at Iran's doorstep. That is why it makes sense for the Americans to boost their presence there. You also have other major US bases in Bahrain, Qatar and the UAE. Again, these are long-term installations, making them ideal for an additional influx of troops. Another major base is in Djibouti in Africa, at the tip of the Red Sea, right across from Yemen, which is where the Iran-backed Houthi group is based in Yemen. We told you that the Houthis plan to step up their attacks on global shipping. Well, the US is prepared. Not just with that base in Djibouti, but also additional naval deployments. The US already had ships in the Red Sea to deter the Houthis. Now it has sent 4 guided missile destroyers to augment its presence. The Americans also have ships in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. This is near Israel's coast, which means near both Gaza and Lebanon. You may have heard the term gunboat diplomacy. It's when countries send both diplomats and warships to another nation, just in case negotiations fail. The US was famous for this back in the day, and it seems old habits die hard. The US currently has 3 guided missile destroyers and 1 amphibious assault ship in the Mediterranean, and they're sending one of their aircraft carriers as well. The USS Harry S. Truman is on its way to West Asia. It is traveling with a strike group. This means more destroyers, more carriers, and more frigates, all making their way to a volatile region. The Americans already have 1 aircraft carrier in the region. It's called the USS Abraham Lincoln. It's said to be operating in the Gulf of Oman, breathing down Iran's neck. So the second carrier will probably be deployed in another region. As you can see from the map, America has all of West Asia covered to make sure that nothing happens to Israel. But that's just the US. What about the rest? Well, no one compares to the Americans, but the UK is also ramping up its presence. Britain has bases in Cyprus, and it has deployed 700 additional troops there, joining the 500 they had deployed earlier this summer. The UK also has ships patrolling the eastern Mediterranean to fight the Houthis and to help with evacuations if it comes to that. Now, amid all of this, India has sent ships to the region as well, but for a very different reason. 3 Indian ships have docked at the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas: the INS Tir, INS Shardul and ICGS Veera. These ships are in Iran for training exercises. The Indian ships arrived in Iran on Tuesday, hours after Iran fired missiles at Israel. Talk about awkward timing, but the Indian ships are there now, and they will go ahead with a scheduled training exercise, thus adding to the deployments in the region. So that's how things stand right now. As you can see, West Asia is a powder keg. The next strong move can set it off. Let's hope it doesn't come to that.
Not only the right, but the duty to fight evil.
Iranian military forces have reacted to the aggression of the Zionist regime.
This kind of ballistic missiles were never launched in the history of the world.
Reaction of Netanyahu itself shows exhale of the painful strike.
Are Iranian nuclear and oil installations on target?
They know what is feasible, what is not feasible.
Did the Iron Dome fail?
We were actually very successful. All these missiles have missed the target.
The Iron Dome failed to intercept most part of our missiles.
Do you see India as a potential mediator in this conflict?
India is playing a very important role in our region.
Wars are not just fought on the battlefield, they're fought over the airwaves too. I'm talking about the battle of narratives, and the recent face-off between Israel and Iran is no different. We've heard different versions from both sides. Iran says the attack was successful. Israel claims that it was defeated. Such narratives often play out on different platforms, but we decided to merge it. Today we interviewed the Israeli ambassador to India and the Iranian ambassador to India. We spoke to them about the same issues and narratives, like did the Iron Dome fail? How will this war end? And what is India's role? The answers they gave tell you what the root issue is, a divergence in worldview. The first question was about the recent missile attack. Did Israel poke Iran into attacking? And if so, what was Iran's main motive? Listen to what the ambassador said.
They are the only country in the world that has sworn to destroy another country. That's completely unacceptable. And they are pursuing this path systematically. When we put in danger their path by removing their tentacles of this octopus from the region, then they decide to attack directly. That's their true face.
Iranian military forces have reacted to the aggression of the Zionist regime, assassination of Khamenei inside Iran, in the territory of Iran, and assassination of Secretary General of Hezbollah, who is a close and valuable friend of Iran.
A big question now is, how will Israel respond? Some reports say it may target Iran's nuclear sites. I put this question to Israel's envoy. Understandably, he was reluctant to reveal much, but the Iranian envoy did answer. He warned of a much bigger escalation.
If it do anything against Iranian nuclear infrastructure or Iranian oil industry, the reaction of Iran will be more painful for Israel.
The government of Israel has the right information, and they know what is feasible, what is not feasible, and I'm not going to answer at this point instead of them because I don't know.
Now to the
only tragic result was the killing of an innocent Palestinian in Jericho, a Palestinian from Gaza, and all these missiles have missed the target.
You can see the explosion of strikes in different parts of Israel, or we call it occupied territory of Israel. They failed to intercept most part of our missiles.
Then came the most important question. How will this war end? Israel's ambassador spelled out 3 main objectives in Gaza, in Lebanon, and in Iran. He did not say how they would be achieved. But that's been Israel's style. Keep everyone guessing. The Iranian ambassador flipped our question, though. He predicted a very different end to the war.
Netanyahu has hijacked the people of Israel, hijacked the state of Israel, hijacked the whole region, hijacked United States by continuation of this war. So I hope that, and I believe that it is not too far, that this war will lead to the collapse of coalition in the Israel.
First of all, we want our hostages back from Gaza, and we want to prevent Hamas from rearming and regrouping. We already have most of our residents in the south back in their homes. In the north, we want to bring safely our population back to their homes by removing the infrastructure that Hezbollah has prepared on the other side of the border to attack them in order for them to feel safe to go home. And we want to make sure that the Iranians will not launch attacks like that again in the future.
Of course, to end the war, someone needs to mediate. And that someone's been missing in West Asia. Last week, India's foreign minister suggested that New Delhi could help out. Israel welcomed that offer, but Iran's ambassador said something interesting. He said Tehran hasn't had many discussions on Gaza with India. Why? Listen in.
We did not have any discussion regarding the Gaza issue with India, frankly.
Sorry, but why didn't you have the conversation if you think you should have had it?
We did not feel such this readiness. We just witnessed or heard some official position, official stance from high-ranking Indian authorities. Another issue is that we believe that Hamas is not terrorist. Hamas is a resistance group.
To the best of my knowledge, India hasn't been involved in offering specific ceasefire deal. I think that India is playing a very important role in our region. I think that what India is offering the region actually should be grabbed by the countries of the region.
Another possible mediator is China. They have been siding with Palestine. They've also brokered a peace deal between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. So naturally, Israel's ambassador is not thrilled. But that's not the surprise. Despite being a partner, Even Iran wasn't thrilled about China's role. Their ambassador says Beijing hasn't really presented a concrete peace plan.
They've been so far friendly to us. I think their approach on the international stage when it comes to the Palestinian question, another question, is wrong. And we've been telling them that. We have been criticizing their approach. We have this dialogue with them.
Till now, we did not witness any efficient or practical proposal from China regarding the tension regarding Gaza or Palestine or Israel.
So do you count it among your friends?
Friendship and hostility is not something, it's a binary 0 and 1. It could be in some cases you are friend, in some cases you have different idea, in some cases you are competitors, in some cases you may stand against each other. So China generally is our friend.
As war clouds loom large, what does life in West Asia look like? Short answer, millions are living in two different realities. In Israel, while Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu plans a retaliation, Israelis are celebrating the Jewish New Year and couples are getting married in bomb shelters. In Iran, pride has flooded the streets. Thousands are celebrating their country's bold move, while others are preempting grave consequences and queuing up for fuel. In Iraq, around 100 babies have been named Nasrallah in honor of the Hezbollah leader who was killed in Lebanon last week. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, a mass displacement crisis is underway, with around 1 million people rendered homeless within a week. Amid the constant reminders of war, West Asia grapples with love, hope, grief and fear. Here's a report.
Israel is embroiled in a multi-front conflict, and its people are in a state of suspended animation, surrounded by reminders of war. But sometimes there's a glimmer of hope. Set against the breathtaking view of Jerusalem's old city, an Israeli man proposed to his partner. Their ceremony was interrupted by Iranian rockets flying across Israeli skies.
Above us there were sirens. The sky was red. We saw fire. It was one of the scariest things. But despite the terrorizing fear, we remained strong.
On the very same night, love scored another win in Jerusalem. Under the night sky of missiles, a couple got married. They slow danced in a cramped bomb shelter.
You know, you go with the flow. You don't let that affect your happiness. You don't let it affect, this most important moment of your life. You're like, okay, we adjust. So we will dance in the shelter. We will sign our ketubah in the shelter. We will continue with life. And
yeah, for me, no fear at all. We're in Israel. We know what's going on here, and it's just part of being here.
These are uncertain times for Israelis. As Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu plans a retaliation, the Jewish people mark their new year. It's called Rosh Hashanah. And this year it coincides with escalating tensions. But tens of thousands of Israelis have left their homeland and flocked to another war-torn country, Ukraine. They are in the city of Uman, about 200 kilometers south of Kyiv, on an annual pilgrimage.
It's beautiful here. Everyone should be here.
But coming to Ukraine, there is war going on here.
Who cares? There's a war in Israel. We have God. We have Hashem. That's all that matters.
Really? And
last
how much really?
100%.
Last night it was big missile attack on Israel. Did you speak to your relatives?
Everyone's good because we have God. That's it. There's nothing to worry about. Nothing.
But what do you think about Iran? And
we should take them out. They've been bothering us for way too long, and we got to get rid of them.
Which brings us to Iran. How are Iranians coping with mounting tensions? On the one hand, there's pride. Yesterday, Tehran's streets were flooded with crowds. They were celebrating Iran's boldest move yet in the conflict. Some carried the yellow flags of Hezbollah, an Iranian proxy, along with portraits of its slain chief, Hassan Nasrallah.
I
I'm very happy that we got our revenge. We should have done it sooner.
We expected this to happen earlier so that Israel is put in its place.
But on the other hand, there's also fear. Some are worried about the consequences, afraid that the country is stumbling towards a full-blown war. So people are in preparation mode. And for some, that means queuing up to stock up on fuel, preempting future shortages. It's like living in two realities at the same time. And this isn't limited to Iran and Israel. In Iraq, 100 newborns have been named Nasrallah after the Hezbollah leader was killed in Lebanon last week. The country is still in shock. In the last week, around 1 million people have been displaced in Lebanon. More than 500 schools have been converted into shelters. Thousands of people are sleeping on the floors of classrooms. Thousands of others are sleeping in mosques, in the streets, and under bridges. Amid the war clouds and the saber rattling, millions of lives across West Asia remain on hold. The present-day scenario is a grim picture, but the future could be much worse.
With all this talk about West Asia, we sometimes forget that chaos can erupt anywhere. It's something that India knows well. After all, India neighbours special external faculty in the form of Zakir Naik. Naik is a televangelist who is wanted in India. He is wanted for money laundering and inciting hate between communities. While most countries think that that second part, inciting hate, is troubling, Pakistan seems to view it as bona fide credentials. The Pakistani government itself extended an invite to Naik, asking him to tour the country for a month and give sermons all across. Yesterday, Zakir Naik met Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. Sharif lauded him for his work. And he even said that he had personally benefited from Zakir Naik's lectures. I don't know what's worse, the tone-deaf optics or the fact that Pakistan's Prime Minister is wasting time watching televangelists. But maybe that's not so surprising. After all, their real power lies with Pakistan's army. Perhaps they encourage their pocket politicians to watch TV and stay out of the way. But jokes aside, this isn't a great look. Zakir Naik is a wanted man. He's accused of inciting hatred and inspiring terrorists. A terror attack took place in Bangladesh in 2016. 22 people were killed at Dhaka's Holy Artisan Bakery. 5 people were arrested for the massacre, and at least one of them said that he was inspired by Zakir Naik, that he was a regular viewer of Naik's TV channel. It is called, and I'm not making this up, Peace TV. India swung into action after that attack. The channel was banned, so was Naik's foundation. It's called the Islamic Research Foundation. Investigations found that Zakir Naik was using both to launder money. Meanwhile, Bangladesh banned Naik as well. He's also banned in the UK, Sri Lanka and Canada. So it isn't just India that thinks that he's dangerous. And the most telling is the ban in Bangladesh, a Muslim majority country, because they saw firsthand how dangerous Zakir Naik can be. He fled India in 2016 after his name came up in the Bangladesh terror case. He sought refuge in Malaysia, where he's been living since. But even Malaysia thinks that he's trouble. In 2019, Naik was banned from giving speeches in Malaysia. He was picked up by the police there for inciting racial tensions. He told Malaysians of Chinese descent to go back to China. He questioned the loyalty of Malaysian Indians, and this sparked outrage in the country, leading to the gag order. So he has inspired terrorists and incited racial tensions while preaching on a channel called Peace TV. And Naik doesn't just promote Islam there, he denigrates other religions and even different sects within Islam. There are worries about how this could impact Pakistan, which is already full of sectarian divides, and where minority sects like the Ahmadis are persecuted. Pakistan is already brimming with violence, and they want to add an incendiary preacher to this mix. Zakir Naik arrived in Pakistan on Monday, and he has already courted controversy. He insulted a charity that takes care of orphaned girls within 2 days of landing. This is the person that Pakistan's Prime Minister is praising. And these are the views that he's apparently benefiting from. Now, if Pakistan were a normal country, this may not have mattered very much. It would have just been a problem for the locals and maybe law enforcement. But Pakistan is a nuclear-powered, military-run state with a penchant for extremism. Add Naik to the mix, And it's not just India that should be worried. The whole world may come to regret Naik's whirlwind tour in Terror Central. The British Empire has witnessed yet another sunset, this time in the Chagos Islands. The UK is returning the islands to Mauritius. Chagos is a cluster of strategically important islands in the Indian Ocean. The largest among them is Diego Garcia. It became a military base for the UK and the US when Mauritius, a former British colony, was forced to give up the islands in exchange for their independence in 1968. Over the past few years, there has been mounting pressure on the UK to surrender from several nations, including India. In fact, sources say that India played a quiet but important role. And after more than half a century, the UK is finally handing over the sovereignty of these islands. Why does it matter? And what does the deal say? Here's a report.
The Chagos Islands. It's an archipelago of more than 60 islands in the Indian Ocean. This is a remote but strategically important cluster. After all, this was Britain's last African colony. We say was because after more than a century, the UK has finally agreed to hand over sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. This is a historic move. It comes after decades of mounting anger and years of fractious negotiations. Here is a quick flashback. Mauritius was a former British colony. It was illegally forced to give the Chagos Islands away in return for its own independence in 1968, and Chagos became the so-called British Indian Ocean Territory. Back then, the British negotiated a secret deal with the US. They agreed to lease Diego Garcia, the largest atoll of Chagos, which became a US-UK military base. The UK evicted about 1,500 residents. They were sent to Mauritius and the Seychelles. Britain later apologized for this move and promised to hand the islands to Mauritius when they were no longer needed for strategic use. But that day never came. The UK insisted that Mauritius had no legitimate claim to the islands. Standard colonial gaslighting. But in recent years, the UK has faced diplomatic isolation over their claim. Various UN bodies, including the Top Court and General Assembly, have sided with Mauritius, demanding that the UK surrender. Several nations, including India, have played their part as well. According to sources, India has played a quiet but important role. So finally, they have. Which brings us back to the deal. What does it say? First, it secures the future of Diego Garcia. This island has been central to the territory dispute. Even today, it's a key military base for the UK and the US. It houses Navy ships and long-range bomber aircraft. So the deal guarantees the operation of the base for the next 99 years. And second, it secures the future of the archipelago's people. Islanders who were displaced in the past 5 decades now have the right of return. India has called the outcome a win for all sides, as per sources. US President Joe Biden welcomed the deal. He says that it was a clear demonstration that through diplomacy and partnership, countries can overcome long-standing historical challenges to reach peaceful and mutually beneficial outcomes. But not everyone is happy. The UK's Conservative leaders have called this a weak and appalling move. No surprises there. But about half a century after the UK gave up control of most of its vast global empire, it has finally agreed to hand over the Chagos Islands. But this is one of many, including the Cayman Islands, Falkland Islands, and Gibraltar. Now, the other British overseas territories can only wait for the sun to set on the empire on their shore.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Japan, an American bomb from World War II explodes at an airport in parts of Chile and Argentina. People catch a glimpse of the solar eclipse. In the US, an artist creates a gigantic portrait of Kamala Harris in farmland ahead of presidential elections. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1932, Iraq gained independence from Britain after 12 years of colonial rule. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
Kamala, you're fired.
I say, bring it on.
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill. We know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Eric Ham in Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. Israel carries out airstrikes across Lebanon, including in the densely populated areas of the capital, Beirut. Israel claims at least 15 Hezbollah fighters were in fact killed in the airstrikes. Russia dismisses nuclear talks with the United States and accuses Washington of threatening Moscow's sovereignty by expanding NATO. The current agreement, which limits the expansion of their respective nuclear arsenal, expires in 2026. Vice President Kamala Harris meets victims of Hurricane Helene in Augusta, Georgia. The vice president also met county officials and first responders and assured them of more federal support. Mexican soldiers shoot and kill at least 6 migrants that were heading to the U.S. border. Another 10 migrants also suffered gunshot wounds after they tried to evade a military checkpoint. And the East African nation of Rwanda reports at least 11 deaths and 36 cases of the highly fatal Marburg disease. Rwanda's government begins vaccine trials as it suspects another 410 people have contracted the deadly virus. We begin in the Middle East. What Israel now says it has prepared its air force for possible strikes on Iran in retaliation for Monday's missile attack. Israeli jets were seen carrying out wartime preparations as their air force proposed a potential hit list of Iranian targets.
Iran launched approximately 200 missiles at the state of Israel yesterday. Iran attacked civilian areas and endangered the lives of many citizens. Thanks to proper civilian behavior and high-quality defenses, the damage was relatively minor. We will respond. We know how to locate important targets. We know how to strike with precision and power.
And now Israel says that all Iranian military and nuclear infrastructure facilities are on the hit list as well. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office says its impending attack could include airstrikes and even clandestine operations targeting key Iranian political and military figures. In fact, some of the other main targets that Israel could potentially strike include Iran's oil and energy facilities, air bases and air defense systems, headquarters and command centers of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and missile and attack drone storage and production facilities. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden held a call with G7 leaders as they agreed upon Israel's right to retaliate against Iran. President Biden also said he would unveil new sanctions on Iran. However, he urged Israel against attacking Tehran's nuclear facilities.
Yes, look, I called a meeting of the G7 today. We're working on a joint statement all of us agree on, from Japan to France to Germany to etc. And what we're doing in that regard is we're making it clear that there are things that have to be done. And it's obviously Iran has gone way out of, it's way off court. We'll be discussing with the Israelis what they're going to do, but all 7 of us agree that they have a right to respond, but they should respond in proportion.
Now, with Washington's green light, Israel has shared its retaliation plan against Iran with the Biden administration. Meanwhile, Iran has warned both Israel and the United States that an Israeli attack will draw a much larger response from Tehran.
The security of the region is the security of all Muslims, and we do not want any war or bloodshed. Since I assumed the presidency, every speech I've made has emphasized our quest for peace and security. No nation or region can prosper in the midst of war. We were left with no choice but to respond. If Israel decides to retaliate, then it will face harsher reactions.
As tensions continue to escalate, the United States is sending thousands of U.S. troops to the Middle East, along with more warships and fighter jets, as Washington vows to defend Israel at all costs. And here in the United States, nearly 50,000 dock workers continue their strike as shipments remain halted at East Coast and Gulf Coast ports. The strike has seen goods from automobiles to food and clothing piling up in containers at 36 ports stretching from Maine to Texas. Now, these workers went on strike against the U.S. Maritime Alliance, or the USMX, on Tuesday after months of stalled contract negotiations. The International Longshoremen's Association, which is the largest union for maritime workers on the East Coast, seeks salary hikes, better working conditions, and job security amid growing automation.
The ILA is fighting for respect, appreciation, and fairness in a world in which corporations are dead set on replacing hardworking people with automation. Employers push automation under the guise of safety, but it is really about cutting labor costs to increase their already exceptionally high profits.
Our fight is with these foreign-owned carriers that have made billions of dollars on the backs of longshore men and women for too long.
Yes, sir!
Yes, sir. We're gonna fight this thing until we get the contract we deserve. We're not looking for more than we deserve. We're just looking for what we deserve.
However, the lack of progress in negotiations has raised concerns among those reliant on these ports for business. According to a J.P. Morgan analysis, the ongoing strike could cost the American economy around $5 billion every single day that workers are in fact on strike. Experts say the strike could spike the prices of automobiles, furniture, food, and several other consumer goods. And the United States could tip into recession if the strike lasts for more than a month.
it starts off very low, relatively low. So, we have an economy that's what, $29 trillion in GDP, nominal GDP. So the initial impacts are in the tens of millions. Then we move to the hundreds of millions, on a daily basis. Then eventually you start getting to the billions, and then you get to the multiple billions.
Now, following the strike, the USMX has said that it's proud of its offer of a nearly 50% wage increase to the union. The group also said that it would like the labor union to come to the table for a face-to-face negotiating session. But the workers' union says that the current offer simply does not address their issues, which they've been facing for years now. Meanwhile, the White House has sided with dock workers, saying they deserve better wages and working conditions.
We are urging USMX to come to the table with a fair proposal. We cannot say this enough. We believe that these workers deserve a fair pay, they deserve benefits, and that meets the level of their peers.
President Joe Biden said that the strike could end up being a man-made disaster and needs to be resolved as soon as possible.
The last thing we need on top of that is a man-made disaster, what's going on at the ports. We're getting pushback already, and we're hearing from the folks regionally that they're having trouble getting product they need because of the port strike. And look, there's a consortium of basically 6 owners that control all the ports from all the way to the East Coast down around the Gulf. And they've made incredible profits, over 800% profit since the pandemic. And the owners are making tens of millions of dollars from this. The last thing they need is to profit off of this. It's time for them to sit at the table and get this strike done.
Now, political watchers are saying that the port strike could in fact be the October surprise, as it threatens to unleash economic chaos in the United States just weeks away from the U.S. presidential election. And now moving to the Caribbean, the Dominican Republic has announced a plan to deport up to 10,000 undocumented migrants per week to its conflict-hit neighbor, Haiti. The government says the decision has been taken after noticing an excess of Haitian migrants living illegally in the country.
A protocol will be established for illegal immigrants and their assisted return, guaranteeing dignified conditions and in collaboration with the Haitian authorities.
The expulsion plan comes even as the United Nations has urged countries, including the Dominican Republic and the United States, not to deport Haitian migrants. The mass deportation would mark a significant growth in expulsions after more than 200,000 Haitian migrants were forced to return to their nation last year. Now the Dominican Republic's presidential office has pointed out the slow progress of the UN-backed peacekeeping mission in Haiti against armed gangs. President Luis Abinader, who was re-elected last year, says the instability in Haiti has put pressure on his nation's security.
The crisis in Haiti warrants particular attention. More than 3 years of instability in our neighboring country has put significant pressure on our own security. We come strongly requesting the involvement of the international community in a leading and sustained role in the stabilization of Haiti.
Now, it's important to note that this is not the first time that the Dominican Republic has taken a tough stance against migrants from Haiti. In fact, last year, the country accounted for 96% of Haitian nationals deported from around the globe. The Dominican Republic also closed border crossings with Haiti, citing a canal conflict. In fact, President Abinader was re-elected after he promised to build a border wall with Haiti, an idea he first floated in 2022, taking inspiration from former U.S. President Donald Trump. As the Dominican Republic hardens its stance on its neighbor, severe hunger now affects nearly 6 million people in Haiti, as armed gangs continue to expand their presence around the capital. And staying on the subject of immigration, in Canada, major changes are on the horizon. The government is tightening rules for spouses of students who want to work in the country while their partners pursue educational advancement. With plans to cut more than 100,000 of these spousal work permits, Ottawa will make exceptions for highly skilled students and workers in select fields. Here's our story with more.
Canada is gearing up for a major shakeup in its immigration policy, one that is set to impact international students and their families in a big way. Over the next 3 years, the country plans to cut more than 100,000 spousal open work permits, drastically limiting who can come to Canada to work while their spouse studies. So if you are an international student or thinking about becoming one, these changes could be a game changer. Because Immigration Minister Mark Miller has outlined a clear goal: fewer work permits for the spouses of international students, with new rules targeting specific advanced degree programs. Meaning, if you are pursuing a master's degree, your spouse may no longer be eligible to work unless your program is at least 16 months long. Now, with the implementation of new rules, the focus is shifting towards highly skilled students in specific fields. Earlier this year, Canada signaled that only spouses of students in doctoral or select master's programs at designated learning institutions would qualify for work permits. Even some undergrad programs in high-demand areas will be spared. But for most students, the landscape is tightening. Moreover, these changes are part of a broader strategy to reshape Canada's immigration system, which is straining under the pressure of record numbers. More than 2 million temporary residents arrived in 2023 alone, and the government wants to reduce that to 5% of Canada's population by 2026, down from the current 6.5%. Though it's a bold move, it also signals a pivot away from the pandemic-era immigration surge that aimed to fuel the economy. And that's not all. Canada's study permit system is also evolving. Though masters and PhD students won't be affected by the study permit cap in 2024, in the coming year they will be part of the new quota. In fact, 12% of the 437,000 study permits will be capped for the following year. While no official date has been announced for these restrictions on the spousal open work permits to kick in, the clock is ticking for those hoping to bring their spouses along to Canada, because the Trudeau government is also about to reveal its immigration levels plan on the 1st of November. The plan for the first time will include specific targets for temporary residents over the next 3 years. With these new policies, what's clear is that Canada is tightening the reins on its immigration system in response to a booming influx of students, workers and families. For those hoping to study or work in Canada, the rules are changing fast, and the future of immigration looks a lot more selective.
And finally, to the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer is facing backlash after accepting gifts worth thousands of dollars, including Taylor Swift tickets and luxury clothes for his wife. While Starmer has now paid for some of the gifts, the scandal has spiraled out of control as peers in his government have also taken gifts from donors. Our final report explores this growing issue of gifts and giveaways in British politics.
Britain has a long history of taking things that don't belong to them. Remember the Kohinoor diamond? It's a glittering symbol of colonial plunder. Well, it seems that old habits die hard, because the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is caught in a storm over freebies. The man in charge of the country apparently borrowed tickets to see Taylor Swift and rent his wife's wardrobe for London Fashion Week. Yes, you heard that right. He's paying back more than £6,000, which is nearly about $8,000 worth of gifts and hospitality. However, the British Prime Minister has drawn the line at football tickets. After all, being the Prime Minister of a country comes with perks, and he needs a VIP box for security reasons. Starmer's impressive list of returned goodies include 4 Taylor Swift tickets worth $3,600, and he even coughed up over $2,500 for a day out at the Doncaster races. But his generosity doesn't stop there. Over $1,000 was repaid for his wife Victoria's rented fashion ensemble and an hour of hair and makeup. After making his wife happy, the British Prime Minister went on a shopping spree and bought clothes and glasses worth around $44,000 from Labour peer and donor Wahid Ali. Starmer, however, didn't just stop at fancy suits. He also borrowed the keys to Ali's $2.37 million penthouse during the election campaign. The reason? To protect his son from pesky journalists while the kid studied for his senior secondary exams. Now, after creating a lot of ruckus and happily enjoying all the freebies, the British Prime Minister has now vowed to overhaul the rules on freebies for ministers, presumably to stop future leaders to enjoy the perks he once had. So, he promised to set principles of general application. Because until now, British politicians have been winging it, using their best individual judgment. And of course, Starmer's not alone in this. Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, was recently hosted at a DJ booth in Ibiza. The hospitality valued at a modest $1,000. Feeling a bit FOMO, Foreign Secretary David Lammy also enjoyed a Spurs vs Arsenal match complete with hospitality to the tune of $3,000. Because why settle for standing in the bleachers when you can have luxury seating? In the grand scheme of British history, the Prime Minister accepting a few £1,000s in freebies might seem trivial. After all, it's not exactly stealing the Kohinoor, is it? But it sure does add a modern twist to Britain's rich tradition of taking things that aren't quite theirs.
That's all we have time for today. We certainly thank you once again for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks again for watching, everyone. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
Kamala, you're fired! I say, bring it on.
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.
Firstpost decodes the U.S. election, explains how America chooses its president. You're a primer on the race to the White House. Everything you need to know about how America votes and its global implications. U.S. Election Explained. Every Monday and Thursday only on Firstpost.
Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. Hello and welcome. We begin with the latest from Nigeria, where amid growing economic woes, President Bola Tinubu has left for a 2-week vacation to the United Kingdom. Tinubu, who is the 16th person to hold the president's office, left for the United Kingdom on Wednesday, and he will return to Nigeria once his leave expires. In a statement, the president's advisor said that the head of state would use the 2 weeks as a working vacation and a retreat to reflect on his administration's economic reforms. The announcement on the president's vacation during an economic crisis triggered reactions on social media. While some questioned who approved the president's leave, others said that he might as well step down and take a longer break. It is not clear whether Tinubu, who has been in office since May of 2023, transferred his powers and responsibilities to his deputy, Kashim Shettima, as mandated by the Nigerian constitution. Tinubu is known to have taken several official and private trips outside Nigeria ever since he came to power in 2023. So much so that he, along with Kenya's President William Ruto, have also been labelled as Africa's flying presidents. The opposition in Nigeria have also called him tourist-in-chief. Now, a report by the Nigeria-based International Center for Investigative Reporting found that Bola Tinubu had undertaken at least 17 trips between May of 2023 and April of 2024. Now, Tinubu's so-called working vacation to the UK comes at a time when Nigeria is dealing with its worst economic crisis in a generation. The West African country, with a population of more than 200 million, has seen fuel prices soar and inflation hit nearly 3-decade highs. Now, ever since he has come to power, Tinubu has undertaken several reforms, such as easing foreign exchange controls, devaluing the local currency, and cutting subsidies on fuel and electricity, which experts say would help Nigeria attract more investors and revive the economy. But it has led to more hardships for Nigerians who are already struggling with eroding household incomes, high rates of unemployment, worsening crime rates, and skyrocketing food prices. At least 2 rounds of protests have been held against Tinubu's reforms that are aimed at cutting government spending and stimulating long-term growth. Protesters who took to the streets in August and again in October have demanded Tinubu to lower food, electricity, and fuel prices, as well as bring an end to their misery. Tinubu, in a speech to the nation on the 1st of October, which marked 64 years of Nigeria's independence, defended the reforms as necessary and said the reforms were already yielding results, such as attracting more than $30 billion in foreign direct investments ever since he assumed office last year. But turning around the debt-laden economy of Nigeria, which late last month saw the World Bank approving a $1.57 billion loan program to support its healthcare and education sectors, has been taking longer than anticipated. The country is struggling to raise output of oil, which is its biggest export earner, while red tapeism and policy inconsistency have discouraged investors and global brands from investing in the country. Now, we will continue to track the evolving situation in Nigeria. While a vacation does give one a fresh perspective and a clearer mind, it remains to be seen whether Bola Tinubu's time off in the UK helps him to resolve the crisis back home, which so far the citizens say he has failed at. To talk more on this, we have with us Chris Khwaja, a political analyst who is joining us live from Abuja. Thank you for being with us, Chris.
Thank you.
Now, what are the public perceptions in Nigeria regarding President's decision to take a vacation abroad, especially at a time when ordinary Nigerians are feeling the financial pressures? And how might this affect his political standing?
As at the last count, the president has undertaken 17 trips outside this country from May 29th 2023 to date. And these trips are both official and unofficial. The president left this country yesterday, and he is undertaking an official and unofficial trip as well. In the statement that was released, it was called a working vacation because he will be reflecting on the present economic reform with respect to issues around unemployment, insecurity, and inflation. For Nigerians, the president was elected to do two things. One, to protect them, and two, to provide for their welfare in terms of social provisioning. We've witnessed protests, we've witnessed agitation across Nigeria for better lives. People are concerned about the state of affairs in terms of the slow nature of reforms, and they feel the president need to be more proactive. The president need to understand that where they are right now, they are at a crossroad, and that crossroad is defined by the fact that while insecurity has been on the rise, inflation has also been on the rise. So generally, the state of affairs in the country is not too good. But the point is that regardless of where the president stays, regardless of where he is, the focus should be that they want to feel his impact. And that impact is one in which, even if he's in the United Kingdom, he needs to show them that they have a leader. They have a leader that is concerned about their welfare. They have a leader that is also clear about what the directions of reforms will be, rather than living a life that is unpredictable in terms of how decisions are taken.
Yes, and on that, how might this vacation impact his administration's ongoing economic reforms and the other key initiatives?
For many Nigerians, the expectation by 1st October was that they will see decisions that are geared towards addressing some of the lacunas that existed in the last 1 year or more. And one of it is for the president to take a more deeper and critical look at his team with a view to repositioning or rejigging that team towards achieving the best of results. That has not taken place. We are in 3rd October. It's possible that part of what the president is going to do as he travels to the UK will be to reflect and come up with more concrete decisions or steps towards addressing some of those lacunas. We are waiting. It's 2 weeks. Nigerians are waiting. After 2 weeks, or even before the elapse of the 2 weeks, it's possible from the UK he will be taking such decisions, since his press people are here in the country and they will be informing Nigerians or communicating with Nigerians about the outcome of such decisions taken by the president.
Right. And could this vacation be seen as a strategic move for international diplomacy or personal health? And what are the possible benefits and drawbacks?
Public office holders have a right, constitutional right, to a vacation or what you call annual leave. And what the president is doing is to exercise his right to taking vacation or annual leave like any other Nigerian. And what, for me, the focus will be not more about the vacation, but about the value that will come from some of the strategic diplomatic strips that diplomatic engagements that he'll be having in the UK. The United Kingdom is a strategic partner to Nigeria. There are many private sector actors in the UK that have business interests in Nigeria. His visits to the UK should afford him an opportunity of also relating or interfacing with such actors with a view to, again, reclaiming some of the lost grounds that we've experienced when it comes to investors' confidence in Nigeria. And for me, at the heart of this investors' confidence is that the president should be able to take a second look at where we are in terms of our foreign policy priorities with a view to revamping these foreign policy priorities. One of it is the fact that as it stands, we do not have ambassadors across the world. And that is a major diplomatic misstep on the part of the Nigerian government. It's important for the president to send ambassadors out there, because part of what these ambassadors will be doing is to project the image of Nigeria, is to also identify and make new friends, as well as strengthen relations with other old friends with a view to reclaiming some of those lost grounds that we've had in the last couple of years.
Right. Chris, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa and for bringing us all the latest details on Bola Tinubu's UK visit.
Thank you.
Shifting focus now to the war in Sudan. The possibility of a ceasefire that could end the nearly 18-month brutal civil war seems to have dimmed further. The Sudan army has vowed to continue its fight with the paramilitary RSF despite the international peace efforts. Ahead of the ongoing offensive in the capital Khartoum, the Sudanese army declared that it won't stop for the peace talks and would press on with its offensive. Speaking to the media, Sudan's Lieutenant General Ibrahim Gabir also hinted that the army could be getting military support from Iran. He said the army-backed government has the authority to engage in such dealings. However, he added that Iran only supplies weapons if one pays in cash, and the Sudan government currently does not have that. His comments came after several media reports suggested that Iran has supplied the Sudanese armed forces with weapons and drones. At the same time, the Sudan army has also alleged the UAE's role in arming the paramilitary RSF. The army says that weapons are being delivered to the RSF by the UAE via Sudan's Darfur region's border with Chad. Now, the UAE has denied the allegations, but the United Nations says that there is credible evidence. A recent investigation by the New York-based NGO Human Rights Watch has also documented visual evidence of weapons from the UAE, as well as from China, Iran, Russia, and Serbia being present in Sudan. The Sudan army and the RSF have been fighting since April last year. Since the war erupted, the RSF has been able to capture key areas across Sudan, including the capital Khartoum. Last week, the army launched its biggest offensive in months to retake areas of the capital, and the army is currently based in Port Sudan in the east. Multiple efforts to broker a ceasefire have failed. The army rejected the US-led peace talks in Geneva last month, citing the format of talks as well as the UAE's presence. As per the US officials, the talks resulted in some improvement in humanitarian access, but a lot more needs to be done. The civil war in Sudan has created a major humanitarian catastrophe, with more than half of the country facing hunger. As per the United Nations, at least 20,000 people have been killed, but some estimates put the toll up to 150,000. At least 10 million people have been uprooted from their homes. Shifting focus now to Central Africa, where neighbours Gabon and Equatorial Guinea are locked in a territorial dispute over 3 small islands. Now, the face-off between the 2 African countries is being played out in The Hague, where the International Court is now in charge of solving the dispute. Gabon and Equatorial Guinea for years have been squabbling over 3 islands that cover up to just 30 hectares, and these include the island of Mbani and 2 smaller low-lying islets, Cocotier and Conga. They are virtually uninhabited, but the discovery of oil on the islands has pitted the neighbours against each other, who are fighting for their claim. After years of mediation by the United Nations, both sides ultimately agreed to let the World Court settle the dispute. Teams of legal experts are representing both sides at the ICJ. They are contesting which legal documents should guide the court's decision. Equatorial Guinea's claim is based on a convention dating back to the year 1900, when colonial powers France and Spain signed to set out the borders between the 2 countries. It argues that Gabon's claim over the island is factually and legally untenable.
Despite its international law obligations to respect this inherited situation, Gabon began efforts to alter the territorial map in 1970 after Spain had withdrawn its armed forces that protected Equatorial Guinea, and after oil companies had reported significant hydrocarbon prospects in the maritime areas adjacent to Mbanye, Cocoteros, and Conga.
Gabon, meanwhile, says that the ICJ should base its judgment on another agreement called the Bata Convention from 1974, which gives it sovereignty over the islands.
It is therefore up to you, ladies and gentlemen of the court, to determine whether the Bata Agreement is binding on the parties. If it is, the die is cast. This treaty, which in our view is fully valid, resolves all the problems of sovereignty over the islands and the demarcation of borders.
Equatorial Guinea rejects this document and says that the agreement is unsigned and not original. The country told the World Court that Gabon invaded the islands in 1972 and has occupied them illegally ever since. In 1972, Gabon's army drove Equatorial Guinea soldiers from the islands. Gabon has since set up its own military presence in the area. Which side's argument is justified is now for the World Court to decide. The hearings at the ICJ will last for a week, and the court is expected to give its final and binding ruling sometime next year. And finally, to our special segment, Resurgent Africa. Amid the coups and the crises, there are many positive stories from Africa that often get overlooked, but not on this show. Our final story is from Lamu, a small coastal town in Kenya and also a World Heritage Site. For years, the town has been known for its serene beaches and pristine waters, but now it faces severe threats due to plastic pollution. Tons of plastic are being washed up on Lamu's beaches. One NGO has taken it upon itself to not just get rid of this waste, but also transform it into something unique. Our next story has more details.
Plastic pollution is a menace wrecking much of our world. From beaches to mountains, the planet appears to be swimming in discarded plastic. Kenya's coastal town of Lamu once boasted of its pristine Indian Ocean waters and breathtaking beaches. But today, they are littered with all kinds of plastics. Lamu's tourism sector was a leading economic feature for Kenya. But the dirt has turned the town dreary. It has taken away its charm, and tourism has taken a hit. The town, which is a World Heritage Site, has suffered immensely, but some wish to revive its beauty. In a unique and commendable effort, Lamu's tons of plastic waste is being turned into furniture and even a dhow boat. The task has been undertaken by an NGO called Flip Floppy. Founded in 2016, the project has been receiving grants from other NGOs which it uses to buy plastic waste from workers. These workers pick the large amount of waste from Lamu's beaches.
I am a co-founder of the Flip-Flop project, and we are collecting the waste plastic around Lamu archipelago, and we process those ones to make boats, furniture, and also doing a lot of research on what we can do with the plastic.
On average, the workers reportedly collect between 35 to 40 tons of plastic waste annually. This plastic then transforms, going through a journey of best out of waste.
We started collecting plastics a while ago. There used to be a lot of plastic waste in this area, Lamu, but for now, we collect the plastic waste and sell to the organization at 16 Kenyan shillings per kilogram, as we do not have work. That is where we get money to educate our children and also make a living.
The waste first arrives at the NGO's facility. Workers then sort it into different types and colors. It's then crushed, washed, dried, melted, and then molded into different colors, shapes and sizes. From there, plastic waste is upcycled into furniture and dhow boats.
After pre-sorted, we have our sorters, and they categorize into different type and colors. So they keep plastic into types and colors separately. After the separation, we send them to the shredding point, where we break them into flakes, into small particles. After shredding, we wash them, and after washing, we dry. After drying, we process them into extruder. Extruder is a machine where it processes and it melts. Then we put a mold of different profiles.
Since 2019, the NGO has been sailing Flip-Floppy, which is claimed to be the world's first recycled plastic sailing dhow. The boat sailed from the Indian Ocean to East Africa's Lake Victoria. 9 meters in length, the boat was made with 10 tons of plastic waste. Its exterior was adorned with a colorful patchwork of some 30,000 flip-flops. 2 more boats were launched subsequently. But the vital task of recycling is not without its challenges. Workers say that nowadays, plastic manufacturers are adding additives into plastics, which makes it more difficult to recycle. Some plastics also get degraded by the sun and lose quality.
We have a lot of challenge, especially in our collection, because we are meeting a lot of different kind of plastic, which sometimes it's not on the number which has been categorized. So there is a lot of additional of things inside the plastic, which it doesn't give a good quality when you want to recycle. So there is such a problem. And other plastic also, we cannot find a way of how we can recycle them because they need a big industry, and some also they are very low graded because they have degraded by the sun and something like that.
Nonetheless, the combined efforts of Binners and the NGO are giving new life to the town of Lamu, which lost its appeal due to the plastic menace. The newfound way to treat this waste is almost like magic. When the next Flip-Floppy boat sails, the group hopes it would not just bring the world's attention to its beauty, but also the peril of plastic pollution that's inflicting a huge pain to our planet.
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.